Actually, that deer right there is a perfect example of what I wanted to talk about today. And that would be self-filming. And yeah, Andy and I were both there in the tree, but I was essentially self-filming if a doe happened to come by. And then I would have turned into the main cameraman if we'd had a buck show up, because Andy still has a buck tag here in Ohio. And, this actually, I took some notes after a conversation with my buddy Greg Tubbs. And I think I shed a little light and think this is a good video for guys getting into self-filming, maybe been self-filming for a season or two. Personally, I've done this now for 5-6 years. And then obviously I edit a web show that's all pretty much self-filmed with Whitetail Addictions. But, these are just some thoughts, some concepts, definitely that I think guys can take home. And I'll drop in maybe a few tips or things that I do that maybe help the process. But at the end of the day, self-filming is hard. It is difficult to do. And in fact, that doe I shot, we had 2 guys in the tree and ended up not getting that deer on film. And I've got some notes here of why self-filming is hard. And I think these are good to mention and things to take to the woods with you. It's a lot to bring. It adds, despite the gear getting smaller and better, it adds a lot to the process, especially if you're going to hang and hunt, because then you've got to set up a stand plus set up your gear. I will say I have thoroughly enjoyed the one-piece kind of one and done of the pocket arm. In fact, for years, the team had considered the beast arm to be a pretty good option, because we like the fact that you bring it up the tree, it sets, and it's one thing to get done versus the 4th arrow that was like 6 connecting points, between the fake screwdriver and everything else. You're definitely going to lose some enjoyment, I think some guys do, out of self-filming. Me personally, I think I've buckled down and I have found what works for me, and I enjoy it. And you see it every year. And right now, there are so many guys selling their camera gear, selling their arms, because they went through a season, they're like, they didn't kill, they didn't have fun. I think a lot of people... 80% of the people quit filming that ever start filming, let alone if you're going to solo film. I would say we don't get a lot of deer footage that's out past 40 yards. And that was part of Greg's and I's conversation. He's like, man, I just don't have a lot of deer on film. And I'll be honest, I'm like, Greg, dude, I film. If you see a Whitetail Experience film and there's deer footage, that's like 20% of the deer we see as a team, because, especially when you're scouting, you may jump some deer or see some deer in a different area that you can't film them. If you have deer out there 50, 60 yards in the timber, sometimes you can't get them on film. Maybe you do, you catch like an ear or a butt, in the corner edge of the screen. And that's just not worth putting in a video to try and show that you saw deer sometimes. And deer footage is tough because, when you are the solo filmer, the cameraman, you're trying to set up for a kill, but also get some good footage. And honestly, it's sometimes it can happen super fast. You got to be, ready to kill or ditch the camera and make it happen. When you see a deer a lot of times or catch a noise that you believe is a deer, you're reaching for your bow. Maybe you're gauging the caliber of the buck. You're trying to not get busted. That's another huge thing, is you've got 2 things to get in position, and that's just not an easy thing to do sometimes if you have a twig snap and a deer at 35 yards. The deer in the films, I would say the deer we shoot make up a lot of our footage. Solo bucks actually might be some of the easier deer to film. And traditionally we're hunting during the rut, so they got other things on their mind and they're more focused on that. But, when you have does come in, a lot of times, we don't want them hanging around because they're going to pick you off. One quick tip here I've got on a couple of these conversations around getting deer on video is leaving the camera pointed in the highest percentage trail. Like if you've got 2 trails and you think 70% of your killable opportunity is going to be on this trail, you need to, whatever you're doing, you can give an interview, B-roll, I don't know, shoot a time lapse. But when you're done with that, point that camera right there at that kill trail, because that could be where it happens and happens quick. And a lot of times it might just be easier to turn that camera on and push record and not have to drive it, because that's extra movement. The camcorder is by far the easiest. You see 1,000 guys ask about the T5i Canon series, and while that's a decent camera, you can do a lot more for the price point. And I even would recommend a bridge camera for deer hunting videos over, say, a T5i with a kit lens. Camcorders are definitely easier. They can zoom in and out. They have a lot of auto type functions, and I'm not afraid to use some of those auto functions as a solo filmer, because you are not just the cameraman. You are the cameraman and the hunter. As far as being a solo filmer, there are some benefits. And me personally, I don't think I'd ever want a cameraman, at least not for 90% of my hunts. I kind of have that lone wolfish mentality where I'm in there on a mission. As a solo man, you're quieter. I also sometimes don't want to talk with my cameraman about making decisions on where I hunt and how I set up. I don't like setting up two stands in the tree, because it's just extra movement, extra noise, extra potential of risk. I will say this about solo filming: it's definitely tougher to get the extra type shots to tell the story, because it requires a lot more effort and time. Going on these hunts, if you're going to get a couple extra shots, you need the time to get those extra shots, and you're going to need some sort of small tripod or a small POV camera with some sort of selfie type stick. Okay, I have 3 quick tips to kind of leave you guys with, and one of those was leaving the camera in the highest percentage trail or kill area. That's a no-brainer. I killed a buck back in 2016, and I left the camera behind my body facing a trail that was up the hill. And sure enough, that was the trail the buck came down and was able to get it. The other one I would say is, these cameras have those small screens. We talked about that earlier. Sometimes you're just going to have to point and shoot and hope that, in reviewing the footage later, that you actually got the deer on film. I think trying to stare at that small screen sometimes doesn't do you as good when you can just kind of aim that big lens and not be as zoomed in and get the footage that you're looking for. And, at the end of the day, a lot of these guys are making YouTube videos. Nobody's paying you. Nobody's paying you. And you got to be ready to bail on the camera. You can still tell a story, show your friends, have some footage, but you got to shoot deer. That's what it comes down to. Don't be the guy that says, "Oh, I didn't get him because I didn't video him." Until, Realtree wants to send me a check for shooting deer on video, or Matthews, hey, I'm listening though. But until somebody writes you a check and in the verbiage says, "must kill deer on film," you got to be ready to bail on that camera. I bought a Tacticam this year. That's the only POV I like right now. I would maybe mount a small knockoff GoPro or GoPro to the bow stabilizer, but I will say that camera might save me in bailing on my main camera a time or two. I think just how I hunt and how I realize sometimes, hey, the main camera is not going to get to where I need it to be. Guys, let me know if you like these videos. I'm kicking around the idea of doing maybe a small solo filming type course or something, and doing some podcasts and specific videos for some guys that are really interested in taking it to the next level. Guys, appreciate you watching. Team Harder and Bucks, we're out.